glad you could join me again today. We're going to talk about taking the back seat, and I'll tell you what that's about a little bit later. But to start with, I want to ask you, did you ever experience sibling rivalry when you were growing up? Well, my sister and I were 15 months apart. I'm the older one, and there wasn't anything we couldn't get into or fight over. And I remember being really angry when my mother would tell me that I had to give my sister the bigger slice of cake. But my mother was often talking to us about uh, maturity and growing up, and she would use these little things to teach us how to give and to put someone else first. But one of the things my sister and I fought about for quite a long time was who was going to sit in the front seat of the car. And my mother would say, well, the more mature one will give way. So I'd take the back seat because I was the oldest and also because I liked the idea of being more mature. Even though I felt very begrudging, I also felt very proud of myself for letting her sit in the front seat, and sometimes I'd even give her this bigger slice of cake. But learning self-denial can be very untasteful, and it's a life skill, right? It's a life skill that we need for happiness and fulfillment. If we're always grabbing for ourselves, we're never going to know the real happiness of life, because the greedy, narcissistic, and selfish child never feels complete and rarely finds any level of happiness or satisfaction because they're always looking for what they might have missed out on or who got more than they did. Well, sadly, this quality of a lack of self-denial or of self-denial is lost in our society today. It's rarely displayed by our public leaders. Sadly, it's all over Facebook. Everywhere we see is not self-denial, but self-focus. And even our pulpits in our classrooms are teaching the benefit of self-worth and self-promotion and identity. And that just gives us the idea that we are very, very important. And giving to others is really only beneficial if we can benefit from it ourselves. And that's a really sad way to be, because that is so far from biblical teaching. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 3 tells us to esteem others better than ourselves. And isn't that a crazy thought? To view others more important than yourself? To think of their needs and their values ahead of your own? We're just not really taught that today. To lift them up instead of lifting up ourselves, to give them the front seat or the bigger piece of cake. How in the world would that help us get ahead in life if we're always letting someone else get in front of us? That's the questions people would say today, because self-denial is not a part of their equation. So let me suggest 2 benefits for self-denial. The first is that we gain respect. Most people still admire and appreciate a thoughtful person, using manners like opening doors, saying please and thank you, giving someone your place in line, or they say like paying it forward, where you buy someone's meal as you go through Walmart, or not Walmart, maybe Walmart, but McDonald's or something like that, or giving them your seat on the bus. These things cause people to notice. And when you express kindness, it breeds kindness, because respect is earned, not demanded. So maturity means giving place to another because it is the kind thing to do. And you will gain notice and respect when you do that. Another benefit of self-denial is an inner knowledge of good. There's a little verse in Proverbs 14:14 that says, a good man shall be satisfied of himself. Just knowing that we have done right and not been greedy or grabby gives us a feeling of goodness. And we know that we are a good person because we show the goodness in our action to others, and it makes us feel better. It goes along with that, not letting the right hand know what the left hand is doing. We do good with no real thought of reward, and that's totally opposite to the world's thinking. Let me add one more benefit, though, to self-denial, and it tends to self-control. Until we learn to say no to overeating, overspending, even speeding, for example, we've not learned self-control. There's a maturity that calls us to submission to law, and especially God's law. Elizabeth Elliot wrote, "The earlier parents begin to make laws of order and beauty and quiet comprehensive to the child, the sooner they will acquire good, strong notions of what is so basic to real godliness, which is self-denial. A Christian home should be a place of peace, and there is no peace where there is no self-denial. Did you hear that? There is no peace where there is no self-denial. Let's compare that to Proverbs 13:10, which reads, "Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom." So a lack of self-denial is really pride. It's putting self first. And what does Proverbs say is the result? Contention. And contention means fighting and opposition and struggle. So don't we see that all over the news today? This election battle is nothing but a public example of pride on exhibition. And it's a sad thing to watch. But let's not point fingers too quickly. My sister and I could fight over a lot of things, and we didn't want the other one to have first place because our pride was driving our decisions and our actions. And we've all been there. We've all worn the t-shirt, haven't we? And what is the second part of that verse? With the well-advised is wisdom. You know, I'm really thankful for my mother that gave me those good pieces of advice. And being willing to put others first and not demand my prideful self be given the biggest slice of cake or biggest anything has kept me out of a lot of problems and heartaches. Being a demanding person is taxing on everyone, but people who give are a joy. People who only think of themselves can't really be trusted because they're looking out for self, and you are not in their equation unless it's a benefit for them, and then you're just being used. So self-focus causes short tempers, resentments on both sides, and it makes for poor relationships and poor decision-making skills. But God's way is very different. He says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Condescend, he says. Give way to others. Share what you have. All of these are great verses. He says, look to the ways of others, not for gain, but in order to be a blessing. And there are many, many more instructions in God's Word that teach this beautiful quality of self-denial. So let's make it a habit of life to practice self-denial at least once a day. Just try it. See if it doesn't produce more peace and happiness in your life. Give someone else that biggest slice of cake and go sit in the back seat and thank God that you've got a ride anyway and enjoy the view. I'll see you next week.